Scooby-Doo Camp Scare is an animated feature film from 2010. This is directed by Ethan Spaulding and it's written by Jed Elinoff and Scott Thomas. And we have the usual Scooby voice cast. We also have Mark Hamill, Tara Strong, Lauren Tom. Really brilliant voice cast. Definitely no complaints there. However, I wasn't sure if I'd love this, just based purely on the title, which I know is not necessarily the best way to judge whether or not I'm going to enjoy a film, but I didn't feel like the setting would be very appealing to me. I have to say, I enjoyed the film more than I thought, but at the same time, I still don't love the setting. As I've mentioned before, I prefer the Scooby films where they're in a very obvious spooky location, like a castle or a cave, somewhere that's generally very spooky. Granted, camping is probably one of the most terrifying things ever, and I'll probably never do it. But I wasn't sure if the environment would be that scary. However, it definitely had its moments, but I still don't think it's ever going to be in my top 5 or even top 10 Scooby films. Basically, the gang are at a campsite, and there are actually, I don't want to go into too much detail, but there are several different monsters, creatures, several different mysteries, and whether or not they tie together, I'm not going to say, but I will say that actually the narrative is very well written, and there are several layers to it that I think flow really well, and even though there's a lot going on, it's not hard to follow or anything. The only bit I didn't like, and this is personal preference, is that a decent chunk of it is set underwater in the lake, and it makes sense within the context of the narrative, but for some reason, and I've mentioned this before, I don't know what it is, but I do not care for animations set underwater. There might be some exceptions, but honestly, I can't think of any. So that part of it, I just didn't find that interesting, but then we have the bits that are on ground, on land, and we have a very kind of autumnal vibe with a lot of the colours, particularly when night falls and the trees are much darker, and that's kind of atmospheric. So on the flip side, that worked really well for me. And I won't go into detail about any of the creatures. There'll probably be one on the poster for this one, but I will say that the one underwater I didn't find that interesting, but I like the design of it. There's one on land, the Banshee. You'll know which character it is because they tell you. The Banshee, I thought, was a really great design, and that, for me, is the kind of character that I love in Scooby-Doo. That really spoke to me. I loved the design of it. So creepy. So that, I thought, was fantastic. It's a decent story. The characters are interesting. The mystery elements are very detailed, and there's a lot more going on than I expected, but in a way that's really satisfying. And just for information, it has 7.2 out of 10 on IMDb, across 4.6 thousand reviews and ratings, which is a pretty sizable pool of opinions. And while I personally don't rate it that highly, I honestly can't fault it. There's nothing about it that didn't work. Yes, there are elements that maybe don't appeal that much to me personally, such as the actual camp setting. Apart from when it was nightfall and things were kind of spooky, I wasn't that bothered about it. The scenes underwater didn't really care for, but actually it ticks all of the right boxes. I'd probably never watch it again. It definitely isn't in my top 10 list of Scooby films. Maybe I'll try and do that list at some point. If you have a top 10 list, I'd love to know what's on it. But I enjoyed it significantly more than I was expecting. The mystery elements are really fascinating, and we have some really fun characters as well. Do I recommend it? Absolutely. If you're a fan of Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo Camp Scare is definitely worth watching. It certainly exceeded my expectations.